Hey, this episode is dedicated to Emma Janzen. She's at Emma Janzen on Twitter. That's Janzen. She's a journalist, editor, and photographer. This episode is dedicated to her for a generous retweet of episode 289 with Annalise Jolly and Zahara Gomez. Thank you, Emma. And hey, before we dive into the interview, I want to remind you that the submission deadline for issue 3 of the audio magazine has been extended to December 31st, which means you got like a week, man. Theme is heroes. Essays must be no more than 2,000 words, submitted as a written document. If it's accepted, we will worry about the recording process later. So bear in mind, though it is a written submission, that it is an audio essay, so pay attention to how the words tumble out of your mouth. Email your submission with heroes in the subject line to creativenonfictionpodcast@gmail.com. Oh, by the way, I pay writers too. I mean, you're not going to be able to retire on it, but you'll be able to get yourself some sick-ass burritos. Dig.
Am I the Weird Al of creative writing? No, I don't know. Well, that's okay if I am. That would be a compliment, right?
That's now the teaser for this episode when it comes out. Oh yeah, you're in for it, CNFers. This is the Creative Nonfiction Podcast, the show where I speak to badass people about the art and craft of telling true stories. I'm Brendan O'Mara. How's it going? Sonya Huber, she returns. This time she's got a new memoir called Supremely Tiny Acts, a memoir of a day. It's published by Mad Creek Books. It's a remarkable book, and one of my favorite reading experiences of the year. Pardon my stumbling. I've read about close to 50 books. I would say by the end of this year, in the next week or so, I'll probably put away about 45. And it was definitely right up there with, Punch Me Up to the Gods is probably my favorite. The Part That Burns by Janine Olette was fantastic. Supremely Tiny Acts. It's right up there, man. Right up there. Sonya is an essayist, creative writing professor, an author of Pain Woman Takes Your Keys, Cover Me, a health insurance memoir, and Opa Nobody. You know when you look up into the sky and there's a ton of stars, but then you see a wicked bright one, and you're like, fuck, that's a wicked bright star. That's Sonya Huber, but we'll get to her in a moment. Support for the Creative Nonfiction Podcast is brought to you by West Virginia Wesleyan College's low-res MFA in creative writing. Now in its 10th year, this affordable program boasts a low student-to-faculty ratio and a strong sense of community. Recent CNF faculty include Randon Billings-Noble, Jeremy Jones, and CNF Pod alum Sarah Einstein. There's also fiction and poetry tracks. Recent faculty include Ashley Bryant Phillips and Jacinda Townsend, as well as Diane Gilliam and Savannah Sipple. So no matter your discipline, if you're looking to up your craft or learn a new one, consider West Virginia Wesleyan, right in the heart of Appalachia. Visit mfa.wvwc.edu for more information and dates of enrollment. Oh, and if you head over to brendanomera.com, hey, you'll find your show notes to this episode and a billion others. And you can also sign up for my up to 11 monthly newsletter. It's this thing I've been doing for like 10 years. It's changed a bit over the years, but it's rock steady recommendations, raffles, exclusive happy hour, cool links to articles, some things I've done, mainly things that I've admired and curated over the course of a month that I want to share with you. First of the month, no spam. As far as I can tell, you can't beat it. And you can always keep the conversation going on the socials, at CNF Pod on the Twitters, and at Creative Nonfiction Podcast on Instagram. If you have a moment, consider leaving a kind review on Apple Podcasts. We've stalled out a little bit. Listen, a podcast like mine, it feeds off the kindness of reviews. I have no name recognition. You know this. I mean, my name is really cool, and it looks great in print, but people are still like, who? Who are you? But if they see a giant pile of nice written reviews, and there is a big pile considering the amount of reviews that are there, the wayward CNFer will be like, well, shit, I got to give this a try. So, and if you do leave that review, I'll read it on the air. It's only fair. I'm not a monster. And Patreon, You know this. It's how we subsidize the enterprise and keep the lights on here at CNF Pod HQ. It's how we pay writers that fat burrito money for the audio magazine. Also, members get to ask questions of guests, and I give you credit for that. Like I said, I'm not a monster. There's transcripts too. I'm sorry I'm a little behind, but yes, you get transcripts. There's coaching available and the knowledge that you're helping the community. And I'm also working on some other fun goodies, exclusive stuff, maybe video stuff, maybe crafty stuff. I don't know. That's the fun part. And when you're a part of the Patreon community, you get that little peek behind the curtain. All right, one more sponsor. This show is brought to you by the word allurophile. A person who likes cats, a cat fancier. I'm sure you know one or two allurophiles. It's a tricky word to spell, and it's even harder to pronounce for me. It's a funny word. All right. You know, I riff at the end of the show. So for now, let's get to the main course. This is episode 293 with Sonya Huber. Yeah. How have you, over the years, learned to embrace the book promotion part of the book publication?
Well, what I did this time, instead of doing readings, I've been offering free classes, and that's been so awesome and so different because I sort of am encouraging people to do this thing where they're writing what happened to them during the same day that we're doing the workshop. Mm-hmm. And so it's really nice. Like, people talk about their lives and share. It doesn't feel like it's all about me, which is the part of book promotion that I really don't like.
That's a really clever way to go about it. For me personally, I'm not a huge fan of author readings. Me
neither at all. I kind of hate them.
Me too. I can't pay attention. I tend to not literally fall asleep, but sometimes fall asleep.
Right.
I find them kind of boring.
Yeah.
But I much prefer, and this happens infrequently, but I much prefer the author just kind of giving a mini lecture or something about the book and about the process of the book, and maybe something that's sort of sort of tangential to the book, but an actual reading from the thing is not going to get me to want to buy the book. I'd rather just kind of hear the author riff on cool things that they're interested in.
Totally, yeah. And this is nice because it feels like, I don't know, it's just like it's getting to be with other people, even though it's on Zoom and it's interactive. So, yeah, but readings just feel the same, like sort of artificial and stiff. And I'm not good at sitting still ever.
Yeah, and to your point about a little bit of that writing about your day or whatever, mm-hmm. these classes you're doing, that was kind of like what you had us do at your Hippocamp talk a bit. You had us intermixed with you talking about what you were talking about. You had us like kind of scribble in these cute little notebooks that you handed out. So
right.
I don't know, how did you arrive at that as something that you wanted to do?
I started thinking about the theme of the book, and then sort of about like writing the mind at work, as Philip Lopate advises us to do. And then, I think a lot of my teaching these days is grounded in that. I think partially too, because it took me so long to sort of feel like I had the authority to just talk about the random shit in my head. Mm-hmm. So then that's the thing that I really want, like, to give to other writers is like, just say what you're thinking about and all the crazy stuff in your head.
I think that helps people get over this idea that everything that they write has to be precious and perfect.
Totally.
It's just like, you got to let it rip. If you're not writing bad writing, you're never going to get anything good out.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I'm, like whatever, a couple words out of every paragraph. If I can keep some of them, that's great. But yeah, no, nothing comes out pretty.
No, not at all. But there are those moments every now and again that you would have never gotten to had you not just sat there and written a bunch of shitty sentences and paragraphs. You're like, oh, that is okay, and then you build on that.
Exactly. And then you also sort of, I don't know, like that. Yeah, that's the uncovering process of sort of disagreeing with yourself, and saying like, well, I think this. No, wait, do I really think this? And kind of digging a little bit, and then you learn stuff about yourself.
Yeah, and it's a lot of people talk about the whole, your writing is just it's taking a piece of marble and then revealing what's inside it or whatever. But the thing is, you have to build up the marble first, and then you can kind of refine it. So that's like the hard part, is like just getting enough marble done so then you can start shaping it.
Yeah, which is sort of like some sort of huge geologic process over eons, right? That's not easy.
Exactly. It's like, that is so perfect. Yeah, like there has to be some volcano erupting that is terraforming the earth.
Creatures have to die, all kinds of microscopic sea creatures or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I love it. This morning I was reading an interview with Dave Eggers about his latest book, and I think this one will appeal to you. He said, because he was talking about how bad it is that so much in social media is so performative and everyone's just over recording themselves, and like you can't be creative if you're just shining a camera on you the whole time.
Totally.
And this quote was, but to create you have to tap into the anarchist part of yourself. There can't be rules, and there can't be anyone looking over your shoulder. And when I read the anarchist part, I'm like, Sonya's gonna love this.
And now right? Oh my gosh, my crazy varied past. Yeah, and you have to like just put aside the idea of an authority judging you, and judging what's on the page. Which I tragically, I think like that's what we give children through K through 12 education, is like, I'm not doing it right. And then I had a student this semester in creative nonfiction. He turned in this amazing essay called I Hate English. And it was just about like how he was basically told over and over again, you're not a good writer. You don't have a clear thesis. And I was like, guess what, dude? You're a good writer. But like people get so alienated from their own means of production.
Yeah, well, there's so much in order to become a competent writer. So much of it comes down to unlearning everything that you've learned in the past, and that can even, not to knock on MFA programs too, but I think there's a tendency, and I think that I love the MFA program I attended, but I think I lost my voice in the trying to do whatever it was I was doing. And then it took about 2 years for me to kind of get back to where to like the core of who I was as a writer. And maybe I had to go through that crucible, but I feel like there is a lot of unlearning, right?
Yeah. And I think like I think too, it's about like understanding that your instincts are good, and like which instincts to follow, right? And to like that balance between taking in feedback from other people, but also really getting a sense of what you do well, which I feel like is really hard.
What would you identify as the things that you do particularly well that you can double down on?
Oh my God. Sorry, I just made this face. I almost hurt myself because I was rolling my eyes at myself like, oh my God, what? I mean, I really I'm not in touch with any of that right now. What do I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty profane. I have a low standards. I don't know. Okay, I will say this. Like, I'm pretty good at a tangent. Yeah.
Well, I think your new book is these tangents that come around and bend back on themselves and get us back to our through line and everything. It's really a remarkable piece of work when you say, it's a memoir of a day, but it really just it goes off into all these wonderful directions and still comes back to our it's almost like that paddle ball thing game with the ball's on a string, so it's going out, but it's always coming back.
I love that. Oh my God, that's so great. Yes, I love that as an image. Totally.
Yes. So when you were approaching the synthesis or the idea of this book, like how did you arrive at this that it would be a memoir of a day, but go off on these spurs?
First, I was obsessed with this novel, Nicholson Baker's The Mezzanine, and like it's a random novel. It's a real little thin book. It's about like nothing. Like this guy's at work, and on his lunch break he goes and buys shoelaces and milk. Like nothing happens in this book, but it's so good because it's like the fingerprint of thinking, the stream of consciousness. And I think the bar was really low in that, or it seemed to be low. I think there was probably a lot of a ton of drafting behind the scenes, but it seemed so approachable on the surface that I was like, oh, I want to do that in nonfiction. And then, yeah, it took like 10 years for me to think like, how would I do that? I have no idea. And then do you know about the What Happened project, Andrew Monson's project? So what he did was and I just saw something recently. I think his model might have been some French thing, which I have to look up. But so he invited hundreds of writers to all write essays about their day and the same day. And so he picked like some date in June in 2018. And then like hundreds of people wrote essays about like whatever life handed them. It was so cool because it just felt like this big arts and crafts project. Like we don't get to pick what we get. Like let's just all play with our materials. And then he did it again in 2019, but I didn't do the second one, but I did the first one, and I was like, oh, I get it, and it really, I really loved it. But I didn't really think I was ever gonna actually do a book. And then like it wasn't until like probably 7 or 8 hours into the day that I write about that I was like, could I write about this? And I thought it was an essay. And then it took me maybe a month afterwards of like composing first a chronology of the day and then thinking I had enough to expand it. I was thinking first it was going to be an essay, but then it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And then I saw that I needed flashbacks and, of the action itself and then of the training. And then I decided to just go all the way out on all those tangents. And then I guess the only thing that, like, as far as the tangents coming back around, I didn't know at first that they would return, but I guess you're sort of guaranteed that they will because, I mean, most of us are sort of, at one point in time, we're wrestling pretty obsessively with a few themes. It's just natural. I was surprised at the extent to which the themes kept coming up, but maybe I shouldn't if I had been paying attention to what it feels like to be alive. But it ended up being like, I thought about the structure as kind of like, how a Brussels sprout looks when it grows? Like there's this big thick stalk and there's all these little blurbs off the sides. Yeah. That's like that was my visual while I was writing. Like, it's all going to come back around. It's all part of the same plant.
Yeah, there's a point in the book too where one of the more rewarding things that you do for your students is give away little notebooks.
Yeah.
And and you write, there's something bracing and clean about the rush of writing and the sense of accomplishment afterward. And maybe you can take us to that sense of accomplishment that you see in other people, but also that you feel in yourself, whether you're writing something that's really pyrotechnic or something that is not as precious.
Gosh, I just, this happens all the time in writing workshops. Just happened yesterday with some students. I think for me, the real rush is showing students, look how well this is working. And then having them hear from their peers, no, this is really good. Like having it independently confirmed from multiple people. And I think like, it's only through hearing that then we get a sense of confidence of like, oh, this is my jam. This is the thing that I do. And then it's like the awareness of something you do well combined with like that making you a little braver and braver at doing your thing. Like that's what has felt like to me in my own writing process. Like I realize at this point that I can be weird pretty well. And that feels very bracing and clean to me.
Yeah. Well, that's when it comes to anything, whether it's a book or a podcast, the only way to really if you've found like your audience, whoever that might be, it benefits everybody to go out on the limb, and the more weird you can be, the better. And that doesn't mean like being like Weird Al. It just means being very. It could be.
Although go Weird Al, right?
Although go Weird Al. Exactly. Like so many great. Just eat it. Amish paradise.
Am I the Weird Al of creative writing? No, I don't know. Well, that's okay if I am. That would be a compliment, right?
That's now the teaser for this episode when it comes out. But it goes to show that the only way you're ever going to stand out is to try to appeal to a very small audience and be weird, be distinctive, because there's already someone fill in the blank. We need more of you out there.
Well, and so I always think back to, when I wrote the Pain Woman collection. That was the first time, and it happened really clearly for me, like being a certain number of years into my career and having tenure and being like, okay, they can't fire me. Here it goes. And I just sort of like let it all rip. And then I just got a huge burst of energy from sort of seeing that even if I was writing really strange stuff, some of it seemed to resonate, and it still managed to do all the things that an essay is supposed to do.
Now, I know like, we established that a great strength of yours is profanity and tangents.
Oh, my God.
I know for me, a big weakness I have, it tends to be overwriting, trying to be too clever or too funny.
Yeah.
And then I have to dial that way back in the subsequent rewrites. And so I wonder with you, if there's, what do you struggle with in that vein that you always find yourself, okay, let's reel it back in a bit and get back to really what is really making this thing hum.
Yeah, totally. I'm an overwriter. I write really long. So I'll probably I'm just doing this now with another book project. Like, I thought I had gone through and cut everything I could, and then I print out another draft, and I'm like, oh my God, there's still so much unnecessary stuff. I mean, I feel like in some ways it's the same lack of precision I have with speaking. Like, it really takes me just throwing a bunch of words at something and then clearing half of them away to get a sense of what I want to say and to not waste too much of the reader's time. That's one thing. And then the other thing for me is, like vagueness and like approaching my opinions kind of sidelong, like I think, or I might, like, just say it. But that never seems to go away. So I've always got to go back and like steer in from that.
To your point earlier about, you had the tenure and you were able to let yourself kind of let it rip at some point. Mm-hmm. There was a moment in the book too, you say, for me, there's a constant feeling too of faking at being a professor when I always feel like the person I am at my core won't pass in that role. Mm-hmm. And so I have to be extra aware and amped up to build the hologram of seeming professional or right.
Yeah.
That just gets right at the core of, like, most of us just feel like frauds all the time.
I know. Do you think that's just writers, or do you feel like it's everyone? I would like to know.
I think it's everyone, and I think we don't feel like it's everyone because social media has put out this this airbrushed veneer of what it looks like to be just crushing and on the just crushing it all, and so we're like, shit, I'm not crushing
I'm the
anything.
Of crushing. Totally, I'm being crushed.
I'm being crushed by the weight of the world has crushed my spirit. But yeah, that's just it. Like, it's something we just so wrestle with so much, mm-hmm. and I wonder, how you sort of process that, of putting out the hologram, even though inside you might be like, God, am I even pulling this off?
Yeah, totally. Oh my God, I was just talking about this today with my therapist, because it's a big thing for me. But I think, like, for me, when I think of writing, and I also think of teaching, like, I need people around me to tell me that I'm not fucking everything up, so mm-hmm. students' faces and also student learning over time is like, okay, I know what I'm doing and I'm clear about that because things seem to function. And then similar with work, like I'm all about like encouraging my colleagues, and that's a healthy culture, I think, at least like within the department that I work in. It just takes me checking with other people, because I on my own, like, yeah, I'm not crushing. I don't know whether I'm being crushed or not, and like I really need the committee to weigh in on that. So yeah, horribly needy as a person.
Oh, I know. Jeez. Yeah, like it's amazing we can create in the face of just this this constant need of like validation.
Oh my god, isn't that why we write though? Like I feel like
yeah.
if I was more stable, I wouldn't need to do this.
Yeah, no kidding. I remember one of the animating forces of what made me want to be a writer and a journalist was when I would look at the cover of a book I really admired, and I was like, okay, this is by John McPhee or this is by Dave Eggers. And I got that feeling of, oh, I know what kind of a ride I'm going for because I love those names and I love those writers. And I wanted to, my own ego, I guess, I want to elicit that similar feeling if someone sees my byline on the cover of a book or an essay. And so it was kind of like a need to be seen and validated versus, just writing good stuff because it feels good to write. It's almost like I was doing it as, I don't know, I'm performing to get some sort of buzz instead of, I guess instead of the work being its own validation, it was like, oh, cool, I want the prestige of being on the stage versus the pleasure of having done the work.
Right. Oh, I think that's always like this weird mix of those two. And for me, like, it's also very much like, I don't know, like I feel like anytime anyone says anything strange that I do is working, I'm so drawn to that like affirmation that I'm like, really? Okay, more. I'm just like always chasing like, approval. Which has worked out okay for me so far.
I love in the book too. There were so many things that you riff on so well, whether it's the insecurities around privilege and motherhood. And there's a moment later in the book too about motherhood where you say like you love your son so much that you went straight to inadequacy.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. I was like, that what a line. So like where does that stem from? Where does that come from?
I mean, I think it's just, my son's 18th birthday is tomorrow. And
wow. Congratulations. I mean, you got him to adulthood.
It's like, yeah, so far, like every day I'm like, okay, it's still working. It's crazy. I mean, like just raising a little scrap of a human into like somebody who's functional is ridiculous. So yeah, I do think that anything that we want to do well is really daunting if you think about it. And then I think probably especially for parenting, I just am pretty well in touch with all the ways you can fuck it up. So I just, like don't want to do any of those things. And I did have someone who I was talking to about the book who was like, you're really hard on yourself. Like, why is that? And I'm like, oh, you can come to me next time. Come with me to therapy next time. But yeah, there is that sense too. I think like, for essayists especially, like I love our tribe of nonfiction people, but we are sort of, I think, drawn to examine and reflect, and like that just gets you into some whirlpools, like some of the habits of mind that make good writing also make us more aware of how fraught things are.
Well, yeah, and also to get to the heart of an essay or a book, and especially if there's a certain degree of that whirlpool of self-examination, like you really have to get to a place of discomfort, and that often means you got to get ever more closer to the marrow, and that's just, it's a hard place to go.
Yeah, and you have to really that's where your material is, unfortunately, right? Is exactly at the growth plate. You know what I mean? The point where there's a sore or there's like a question or an instability. That's our plot in nonfiction. So I think too, but on the flip side, I feel like I was just thinking about this today after having workshopped a really difficult student essay on Tuesday about a student of mine who was in an abusive relationship. I sort of, on the flip side, I feel like because of, what we do as writers and also what we do as readers of nonfiction, I feel like it's given me some sort of comfort and resilience with thinking about all those hard issues because I'm always like pushing myself toward them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're right too. The fact that I have to open up my own heart, the live unknowing of nonfiction, which is our research. I tell
Mm-hmm.
them, meaning your students, the work of looking into our minds and being honest about what is there, the
Mm-hmm.
emotional work of feeling it, the resistance to it, then the swimming in another person's experience and wondering what other people's lives are like.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of where where the juice is for you, and how you try to convey that message of what is so great about nonfiction is about, as much as we write about ourselves, we're also it's best to look outward sometimes.
Totally. And I feel like in looking at like our points of discomfort or just things that are unsettled, like the more we get to that vulnerable moment, the more we're able to connect with other people, and to connect our struggles to other people's struggles or likewise the joys. So yeah, I hope at least that being able to write that stuff about what we're crushed by is making us also much more aware of just that other people are struggling too.
And how do you navigate, writing about yourself in a way that's not self-indulgent but is still in service of ultimately in service of a reader?
I never want to waste a reader's time. But I mean, a lot of this is just through having careful readers, like my friends, like a couple writing groups, and having, they will no problem tell me, like, Sonya, you have to cut out half of the Star Wars metaphors. This is not helping at all. That's where I go, is Star Wars all the time. And so, yeah, they'll just tell me, we'll sit down and I'll get pages back with big X's through, and that's great. So my friends who, are my trusted readers also do that same job of like pushing. Ooh, this is the hard stuff. That same discomfort that we start having in our MFA experiences of like, here's the big question that you're circling around, but I can tell you're totally in denial about. And then someone tells you that in a workshop, and you're like, fuck. And like your whole life falls apart for a second. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. And the ill-begotten baseball book I've been shopping around forever. When my editor was in subsequent rewrites of it, he's like, I can tell you're orbiting around certain things here, but you're not quite getting there. And in order to, and it's like, in order to get there, I would have to, interview close family members who are just not gonna talk.
Oh no.
And like it is, and so I've just, it was probably, I was writing around it because it was hard anyway, but then also because I know even asking the question of, let's say, my father, of just certain things that try to get at that and crack that open a little bit, he'll just shut that shit down like nobody's business.
God.
So there's just no way in.
Yeah.
And so yeah, then it's like, what do you do about that? Like, do you just cut out everything?
Yeah.
Or I don't know. It's hard
God.
because otherwise people are just going to notice, like, oh, I feel like there's something more here, but you're just running laps around it instead of like diving into the pool.
Totally. I have one whole manuscript that is sort of just shelved because I don't know if I have the guts to publish it, but the same thing of like, I was just thinking about another book. Oh, I had an essay. I mean, yes, there's been a couple times in my life where book manuscripts have, or essays that are about to be published, have caused some major family conversations. Like in one case, I published an essay about my dad that I just went straight for a print journal, and I was like, first I was like, God, of course he'll never see this, thank God. And then I was like, Sonya, don't be such a dick. Like, just go ahead, just do it. Be a person. Send him an attachment in an email. And it was brutal, just waiting for his feedback because it was about, like his drinking and, whatever. And then it turned out to be this massive conversation that changed our relationship. It was all via emails, but it was a series of things he told me that I assumed would be like, if I was lucky, would be like a deathbed conversation. So, but it's terrifying, right? Like, what other job is like, why don't you push at all the sore spots in your life?
Yeah, when you're having those conversations with your parents, there's almost no way to ask a question about your past without that question sounding judgmental.
Right. And well, like, it's one thing if your parents are writers or whatever, but like my parents are definitely not. And so I can't even imagine what it's like having a memoirist as a kid, you know? Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, because they don't even know that they were on the record.
Yeah, the whole time, right? Like, I thought I was just
Yeah.
feeding you and sheltering you. Oh my God. Oh God.
Yeah, and again, those times that I was asking you to get me a beer while we're driving around creation, and you're like, yeah, and there was a cooler of beer at my feet all the time, and my dad would be like, oh, Ryan, my middle name, my family calls me Ryan. They're like, just get me a beer. And I at some point when I was little, I knew this was wrong, but at the same time, I'm like, this is just what he does.
Right.
And so I'm his little bartender, and just give him his Busch Light while we're just driving around. And it's just like, well, that's not normal.
Oh God.
that
right.
happen.
And then you talk to your friends like in college and you're like, uh-oh. Right? When you're like comparing. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. So was your baseball book was about like fatherhood or manhood and oh man.
Yeah, it's a really a child of divorce memoir disguised as a baseball book. Disguised as a baseball book. So there's just, it's a lot of that stuff, and a very, very early rough iteration of the book too, because my dad was being kind of difficult when I was trying to ask him certain things. Mm-hmm. So I just wrote my thing, I printed the whole thing out, and I mailed it to him.
Which that's great. You did that. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it was a draft that was post the vindictive.
Yeah,
post vindictive
drafts, right?
Yeah, but it was still a long ways away from being anywhere resembling something publishable. But I remember having a long conversation with him because he wrote all his notes in the margins, just a whole slew of bullshits in the corners and every which way.
Like, it was mean.
Yeah, pretty mean.
Oh, fuck.
And it was but it was just his way. He's very defensive and on his heels. I'm like, listen, right. Dad, ultimately, if I've done my job well, which in the end I hope I will, it's like people aren't going to think about you or me. They're going to overlay their own experiences over us.
Right.
And we're just kind of a vessel for other father-son, father-daughter relationships.
Right.
So that was always the way. And that seemed to get him, a little, his hackles went down a little bit after that. But it's been several years since I even showed him that draft. I've been shopping this around for so long that I'm not even so sure he'll be alive when the thing actually sees the light of day. But we'll see. Who the hell knows? I think the latest draft is very redemptive in the end, and everyone comes out okay in the end. It's just you have to show some of those warts.
Oh my God, seriously. And it's so hard. I mean, like my family are not readers. My mom is, but like without having read a bunch of books, the whole thing feels like, it feels like you're going to be splashed on the cover in the New York Times, I imagine, if you're someone who's not in control of the situation at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very exposing. And I think it's, and not in a salacious way, but it's just, I think he probably, and I imagine a lot of other parents of memoir writers too feel this way, that they're going to feel like their friends and the world is going to judge them. And the fact is, and maybe in a moment be like, ooh, I wouldn't do that. But I can't tell you how many memoirs I've read, Sonya, where it's just the father or the mother does something terrible.
Yeah.
But I'm not like, oh, you're the worst person in the world. I'm like, oh, that's just, that sucks in that moment.
Right.
But I don't hold this, you're a terrible, terrible person judgment, unless they are evil.
Right.
But that's rarely the case. Usually everyone is just trying their best somehow.
Right.
And sometimes their best is awful, but at least they're trying.
Right. And it's really hard to raise a kid and never get upset or never do something that you later regret, or it's impossible, I think. So yeah, I think but it has to be interesting too, like, especially with the topic of like masculinity, right? To be like, okay, I'm going to expose you, right? Like that level of vulnerability also doesn't jibe very well with like a certain class and a certain era of modern American manhood.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's no better way that a man of a certain age. There's only one language he can typically speaks, and it's usually through sports.
Yeah,
and that was kind of our common tongue, and then so that's what there's a whole thing around that in the story. So
well, now I want to read it. That sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you. That's yeah. Hopefully it'll come out at some point or another. It's been a slog to get the right person interested in it.
Yeah, I know.
What's that experience been like for you? Like when you've got this thing that it's hanging over your head, you desperately want it published, but you're struggling like hell to get it in the right person or the right publisher's hands.
God. I've been working on this book about inequality in Connecticut for I think 8 or 9 years now. And it's finally almost done, but I went through a big long dance with a Big 5 publisher who was interested really early on, and I was with another agent at the time, and it was, and it's so weird because like crafting a query letter or a book proposal is so different than writing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like it's the opposite of writing in some ways. Like, so usually I have to sort of plan for a low running level of depression while I'm writing query letters or proposals. Like, I just feel so separate from whatever I really want to be doing. And I just, that's just, I mean, so anyway, it's been a long process for me. I finally have another agent, but I've had to, like, I don't know if I talked about this last time we talked, but I think I did. Like I often will just take a break from a project that's haunting me and write something else, which is actually how most of my books have resulted from breaks from bigger projects.
The creative infidelities is what you said.
Yes. Yeah. So this day book is a little recess book from that big wrestling with inequality book. Yeah.
I almost feel like, and who knows, maybe this is a business you and I should start, Sonya. I know with movies, they outsource the movie trailer to other companies, and they cut the flashy thing that makes us want to go and drop $20 on a movie ticket. I don't know. Maybe we need to.
Yeah, maybe they have the formula, right?
Exactly. Like find a really good query writer. See, here's the book. I need a query and a overview for a book proposal out of this. That movie trailer hook of this thing.
Totally.
You write it.
Well, and I finally did. Like, for the longest time, I was like, I don't need help. I'm a writer. I could figure this out. And then finally, like, I got a new agent, and she's awesome, but she was also like, this is just not working. And I was like, shit, I still don't know after all this time how to write a book proposal. So I ended up hiring someone, like a friend of a friend. That was the best $650 I've ever spent. She ripped it to ribbons, but then out of it came clarity. And she's like, here's what you do. And it worked. I couldn't do it. I'm like just not linear enough to do that shit. Just not.
What was not working, and when she reassembled the ribbons, like what was it? What did it look like before and after?
Like before it was, here's the thing. Before it was all very essayistic. Like I was trying to write the book proposal as an essay. And that's not, you have to be a different person. Do you know what I mean? You have to be the person, like the book has to be completely done and completely amazing in your head to write a good proposal. And I can be
just
like
P.T. Barnum for the book proposal.
Exactly. Yeah, I have no level of confidence in anything that I write while it's in process, especially. So I think it's a huge confidence thing for me. And then also, I mean, because I write a lot of stuff that's like research woven with personal story. They kept wanting more personal story. And I'm really interested in the reporting about the causes and effects of inequality. So I was having a really hard time like stepping to center stage until like this person, my editor, was like, look, here's where we need it. Here's where we need it. And she just said, you have to say something about yourself here. Yeah, it took a lot of really direct feedback. And then I felt like it wasn't just mine, and that was really nice.
What would you say your relationship is at this point in your career to ambition?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Oof. I know when I'm challenging myself, and I just want to keep writing books that are the hardest book for me to write at the current moment. Like, do you know when you're just like, okay, I'm in a war with this book?
Yes. Yes, I
do. Like when you've painted yourself into a corner, and then that's where you're supposed to be, God damn it. Yeah. I just feel like for whatever reason, I got a sick personality that loves difficulty. Like I love that level of challenge. I find it, maybe this is what people who like hunt or play video games a lot, or like maybe I'm a version of that. Like I really need a big adrenaline rush, and that's how I get it.
Yeah, I'm like playing Squid Game with my book right now.
Right? Isn't it funny? Sometimes you just like be waking up or going to sleep and be like, oh, fuck you. Or you're like that constant low level nausea. You're like, fuck you, book.
Oh my God, that is like the perfect distillation.
Like you sit down in the morning and you're like, so we meet again.
Like, oh my God, just a seething like, fuck you, son of a bitch.
Exactly. That needs to be a writing movie, right? Not like some drunk guy in a bathrobe, but like somebody who's actually like I've also wanted to just throw my computer into the yard, just like.
I feel like Charlie Kaufman could pull that screenplay off.
Totally. But
anyway, he kind of did it with adaptation a little bit.
Oh my God, that was so good. I love that movie so much. Yes, exactly. So anyway, I feel like, if something happens where like a book of mine gets like attention or an award at some point in the future, that also happens to be the next hard book, like I'll be totally happy. But I sort of feel like I'm just locked into this, like that there are books that I have to write and they're my subjects. But then I feel like I only have a set of limited abilities, so if it does something great or not feels like not as much under my control. And I feel like, I mean, my God, I'm a full professor of creative writing. This is way better than I ever thought I would do. So that's enough already. You know what I mean?
When I see people winning awards or getting notable selections for this, that, and the other of things that I would desperately want to be in, like sometimes if I had, as much as I want that, of course, it would be great to be recognized in that way. Sometimes I think if I had gotten that recognition, I don't know, at 30, not that I've gotten anything like that yet, but if I got it like when I was real young, like 28, 29, 30, I don't know how well I would have processed it and then grown from there. I mean, there's only one way to know, and there's no way of knowing at this point, of course. But I feel like maybe now would be a little more equipped just being this far in. And I don't know, is that how you feel too, just being
definitely.
At where you are in your career?
Definitely. Yeah. Like I felt like I had a lot of time of, like just struggling to figure out my own writing and like, getting publications like we all do, but definitely not getting discovered at age 25 or anything with a review in the New York Times. And I feel like that has made me a different kind of, maybe that's the kind of experience that makes you aim more for difficulty, because that's what you associate with writing.
Yeah,
like it's really difficult. I'm going to make it as hard as possible.
Yeah, or that weirdness we were talking about earlier. Like you just get a little more comfortable in your weird, wrinkly skin. You're like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I have this burrow of weirdness I've dug. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
You come up, you just look like a squinty-eyed mole.
Oh my God. Yeah, sometimes I come up from the basement and like my family is like, Jesus Christ, like what is going on down there?
You're like, I was just having a staring contest with that manuscript, just going, fuck
yeah,
you.
Exactly. I'll just randomly say to my husband, like, oh, I hate my book. And he's like, I know. It's okay.
Oh my
the
God,
hate keeps me going.
Oh man, yeah, that's great. Well, I love it. See, this is what I like about sometimes I have people on the show and we get real granular about a particular magazine piece or an essay or even a book, and then there are some conversations that are more like this that are just kind of like, I don't know, we're in a weird elliptical orbit.
Yeah, ourselves.
I think conversations like this sell more books than actually talking about the books. I truly think so.
Okay, so post-COVID, I guess we're going on tour.
Exactly. The Huber O'Mara comedy show.
You got a problem? We'll solve it. Bring it to us, or else we'll tell you that you're okay.
Oh, you know what? This will catch you a little flat-footed. This is how I like to end shows, and I forgot
cool.
to prime the pump with this. But I've been ending shows a lot lately by asking someone for a recommendation of any kind. And that can be a book, a movie, or a new pair of socks. And
awesome.
I usually prime the pump with the writers, but I forgot to do that for you. But I'll just ask you now. So if there's anything out there that you might just recommend to the wayward listener, what might you suggest for them?
Oh, awesome. So I've been telling everybody, first of all, I just finished last night, Beth, oh my God, I have to look up her last name. Novel The Pessimists that just came out. Oh my God, it's so good. Pessimist.
No. Is it just called The Pessimist?
Yeah. And it's really it's funny and tragic. And
Bethany Ball.
It's just really, Bethany Ball. And I don't know her, but like, she's actually, that's an example of somebody like I met on Twitter, like just because we both seem to have some similar sensibility. And then I was like, oh, I'll buy her book. Oh my God, it's amazing. So yeah, it's really like, I don't know, it's interesting. And it's about like the weirdness of Connecticut. So like, I appreciated that. Yeah. And then also, so I did a piece for LitHub that was a bunch of different books that take place in a day. I did a whole bunch of reading for that, but the novel, I guess these are all novels I'm recommending. How weird. I go in phases where I don't often read fiction, but then I read a bunch of it, like when I want to escape from reality. So
I think fiction's so important to writing nonfiction.
So good. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a relief, too. But so there's this book by Kathleen Rooney called Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk. And it's a novel, but it felt like instructions for how to live. It's like this 80-something woman is walking around New York, just sort of like processing her life and running into random people. It's so good. It's like so weirdly good. It's great. So yeah, two works of fiction I would recommend.
Sweet. Well, Sonya, always a pleasure.
Totally.
To talk shop and just get all weird on the microphones.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
Hey, now we come to the acknowledgement section, thanks to Sonya. And thanks to WVWC, MFA, and Creative Writing. And the word allurophile. I still can't pronounce that word. Allurophile. I believe that's how you pronounce it. A cat fancier. Mm-hmm. Hey, how great was Sonya? It's just a boatload of fun. A boatload. Like a yacht full of fun. I talked a little too much in that one, but that happens from time to time. especially when I have repeat guests on the show. It becomes a little more conversational instead of the me asking questions and so forth. But, I hope you're okay with that. Sometimes you just have to deal and go along for the ride. Getting ready to wrap up this 2021. Remember way back when we bid farewell to 2017 and everyone was like, man, can't get any worse than that dumpster fire. Then it steadily got worse than that every single year. Now we just live in high anxiety all the time. It's like this is the new normal, living in constant dread. So we might as well throw up double fingers and say, so long, thanks for the fish. But if you're not feeling entirely bleak, I know I plan on trying to do something I've never been able to do in my entire life, which is stop complaining so much. Maybe stop complaining. I'm a complainer. I bitch and moan, and I'm basically a walking sad trombone, and who does that serve? I'm not even waiting for January 1st to start, friends. Anytime I catch myself wanting to drop a real negative comment or joke or complaint or a sick tweet, I catch myself and breathe that bullshit away. I'm going to mind my beeswax, and when I feel that toxic twinge, which I feel on the reg, I'm going to channel it into some good work, something creative, something maybe for me, maybe something for public consumption. I don't know. But it just needs an avenue, a pressure valve to go somewhere else and then just realize we're all just animals, man. I came across a blog post by Cal Newport about Twitter-free January, and I'm thinking of doing that just to reboot, kind of scrub, defrag the computer, as it were. And as you know, my problem is getting the word out about this podcast. My other problem is, what right do I have to ask you to share the podcast with your network and your newsletters and your social media and then abstain from the enterprise myself? It's like that time my buddy's very religious mother asked me to place bets for her at a horse race, at a horse track on horse races. Somehow by asking me to do her dirty work, it absolves her of the guilt. So, I don't know what to do. But here's what I do know. I feel crappier for having been on Twitter than not crappy. And that should be reason enough, right? There are people in my Twitterverse who kind of annoy me. Like they take to Twitter to rail on people or rail on an industry or rail on Twitter. And it's like, what's the point? And so what if you win Twitter for an hour? Then what? Doesn't mean anything to dunk on people or an industry or Twitter. Like, if you hate it so much, why do you need to shout about it on the platform? I just don't get the rationale. I guess I do, because you like the attention and you like seeing the little hearts light up and the little blue notification, meaning that someone saw you. And that's pretty much what it all boils down to. And they've hardwired these algorithms to pull those levers of us constantly needing to be validated and seen. This is no new insight, but it's just something once you have seen it, you can't unsee it. Or once someone tells you, it can't be untold. And as you can tell, this has already polluted my brain, and I'm not even on it right now. I'm here with you, riffing about it. Yeah, riff. I don't even know if it works. Like, some days I'll schedule a dozen tweets, and there'll be like 50 downloads. Then I won't do anything at all, and there could be like 400 on that day. So I have no idea what happens. It's all a crapshoot, and I'd rather not waste my time and mental energy in these parting shots on crapshoots. That said, I might keep using Hootsuite, which is kind of like this firewall. To me, it's like a fortification between me and actual Twitter land. Like, I can fire arrows over the wall without having to engage with the armies on the other side. So I think I can still celebrate the people on the show because I feel like I owe it to them to constantly, put them out there. That's why they come on the show. It's part of the transaction. Without having to actually engage and mud wrestle on Twitter. Not that I'm like in it with trolls. It's not how I operate on Twitter, but it's still, I get pulled into this vortex of bullshit that I don't like. I don't know. I will certainly engage in more bite-sized morsels because mainly I want to give people those fist bumps and those props for helping out and for retweeting and for sharing and for trying to engage, because we all just want to be seen, and I don't want to be a total dick. All right, that's got to be it, right? Why don't you stay wild, CNFers? And if you can do, interview. See ya.